Yeah, good evening, everyone. Today we are going to start with a topic that are what are keywords in Python. So let's start with it. What are the rules? What are identifiers? We will be learning about the different reserved words that we use in Python programming language, right? So let's start. Let's begin with the session. Yeah. So what are keywords? Keywords are the reserved words, or you may say they are defined words that is defined in the library that you cannot use as a identifier or a user defined variable, right? Like suppose I am talking about any your name, right? Your name is a variable. Like if I'm taking a field like student name, so student name could be anything like Manvi, or you may say any name you can take it, right? Whereas when we have a fixed thing, like you cannot use it as a variable name. So there are some keywords in Python programming which are fixed and that are defined in the library of the Python, right? So let's begin with the session. Suppose we are taking an example. Hey, the other day I wrote a simple code, finally is equal to 1, but it gave me an error, syntax error, invalid syntax. Why it has given the invalid syntax? Because finally is a keyword. You cannot use as a variable, right? Oh, I know what the problem is. Finally is a keyword. That's what I'm telling you. Finally, if, main, they all are the keywords or reserved words that you cannot use as a variable name. So let's begin with the session and start. How many keywords are there in Python? What are identifiers? What are the rules to define this? Right? So keywords are the reserved words in Python used by the Python interpreter to recognize the structure of the program. So there are 33 keywords in Python which are mainly used by most of the people. Like suppose false, you cannot define it as a variable name. Finally, you cannot define it as a variable name. These are the keywords like for, if, print, input. These are the things which are already defined in the Python library, right? You cannot use these keywords as a variable name, right? So I have mentioned the list of keywords that can be used in your program, right? And in later slides, in later chapter, we will be learning about what are variables, how to define variables, how to assign the value to a variable, what are constants, right? So let us start with the first thing, that is identifiers. Now identifiers are not only variables, it could be a function, it could be a class, it could be a module or any other object, right? So our Python identifier is a name, so it is a name given to the location, right, which is holding some value. And what is that variable, what is that identifier is about? It could be a variable, it could be a function, it could be a class, it could be a module, or it could be an object. Yes. Now whenever we define any identifier, we have to follow some rules. First of all, they cannot be like suppose I am taking an example of addition of two numbers. So if I am taking as one number as number 1 and number 2 is I am defining as number 2, you cannot call it as A or B. They are irrelevant names that are given. So there are some rules, there are some standards when we define the identifiers. So let's start with that. An identifier starts with a letter. So there are rules. A to Z or lowercase a to Z. So they both are different. In yesterday in the previous class, I told you that when it is a case sensitive language, you cannot basically write anything like capital A and lowercase a are totally different. They are not same actually, right? Or an underscore followed by zero or more letters, underscores and digits from 0 to 9. So you can use these number of characters, these number of alphabets, numbers, and only underscore, that is special character, is only underscore is allowed. Other special characters like dollar sign, at the rate sign, percentage sign, they cannot be used in while defining the identifiers, right? And it is very very important, like Python is a case sensitive programming language. So what do you mean by case sensitive? Like I have given one example, manpower and another one. The manpower are two different identifiers in Python. They both are different identifiers, even the names are same, but the first manpower is having the first character as uppercase, whereas when we have the other variable name, that is manpower, in that is totally in the lowercase. So basically they are treated as two identifiers, they cannot be treated as the same identifier because they have different ASCII values in the memory. So, while defining the identifier, what are the rules? And what do you mean by keywords? Right. So, I'm going to take some examples to make you clear about these things. What are the rules for defining the identifiers? You cannot define the identifiers like this. Once you have written any name, and that could be treated as an identifier. Yes, it could be treated as an identifier, but it should have some relevant name. It should not be like that you are taking anything and you are defining it and with giving irrelevant names, right? So the first funda behind that is you need to define the identifiers with some relevant name, so that in future if you are going to refer the some programs, you may easily understand like this identifier, the meaning of this identifier is can be identified with the help of the name of that. So name have meaning, it should be meaningful name. An identifier is a name given to entities, like I told you, it could be a class, it could be a function, it could be a variables. It helps to differentiate one entity from another. Like if I'm taking two numbers, I told you number one is one entity, number two is second entity. So this is how they have segregated, they have differentiate between two identifiers. Now let us start with some rules of this. Identifiers can be a combination of letters in lowercase a to z or uppercase a to z, or digits from 0 to 9, or an underscore. Nothing else is defined under this identifier's name. You cannot take, I told you, you cannot take it as a special characters in this except underscore. Let us move to the second rule. An identifier cannot start with a digit. You cannot write down like this one variable that is treated as invalid. You have to have start with, that is, character. Variable 1 is perfectly fine. Keywords, I told you, keywords are the reserved words that are stored in memory that have some special meaning in the compiler of the, like interpreter of the Python. So basically keywords cannot be used as identifiers. You cannot say like if is equal to 10. So if is a keyword, right? Or finally is equal to 10. So finally is a keyword. You cannot use it as a identifier or a variable, right? So whenever you define any identifier, it should be of relevant name. It should contain alphabets. It can contain numbers. It can contain underscore, except that all are all are basically wrong. right? We cannot use special symbols. I told you only underscore is allowed. The special symbols like exclamation, or you may say at the rate, hash symbol, dollar symbol, percentage, you have bracket symbol, any other symbol, you cannot define it in an identifier. Identifiers can be of any length. So it is not like you are defining number 1, number 2, and they have some specific length while defining an identifier. It could be of any length. That's why I told you, like if you are defining the date of birth, rather than writing A or B and then define and then give the value, that is your date of birth, it's better to write down DOB or date underscore birth. So it's better to have some relevant names. So these are some important rules while defining the identifiers. Let us move to the next part. I'm going to tell you about variables, how they are stored in the memory also, and how we assign the values to the variables. So starting with the first part, variables. A variable is a name location used to store some data, right? So it is location in the memory which has three things. What are those three things? One is the variable name, second is the address, and third is the value, that the value of the variable, right? It is helpful to think that variable as a container. We can say that, like in a picture you can see that it's a shoe box. It's a memory location, and this shoe bag box name is X, and the value that is holded by this variable is 42. So this is how our memory is having our variable, and the name of the location is X and the value of the variable is 42. And how to define it? So you need to use assignment operator for assigning the value. Suppose I am taking 42. The 42 on the, it is basically goes from this side, that we take it as from right hand side, and it gives the value to the left hand side variable. Suppose X is equal to 42. So X is a variable name, equal to is an assignment operator, and 42 is the value. So this is how we have defined two variables, and in the picture you can easily identify these two are the variables and these two are the memory locations which is holding the values 42, right? Let us go into the detail of this. These declarations make sure that the program reserves memory for two variables with the names X and Y. The variable names stand for the memory location, right? It's like the two shoe boxes which you can see in the picture. These shoe boxes are labeled with X and Y, and the corresponding values are stored in the shoe boxes. Like the two shoe boxes, the memory is empty as well as at the beginning. So if in at the beginning we don't have anything, so the value of the variable is nothing, but once you assign some value to a variable, it is stored in that particular memory location. So we should know how to assign, how to define the variable, how to assign, how to give a value to a variable, that is using equal to or assignment operator. Let us move to the next part. Yeah, so I have taken some examples how to write the variables. The first is assigning a value to a variable. That means you have given one variable, you have defined one variable, that is website, and under website it holds the value as a string xyz.com. And whenever I am going to use a print function, I may be using print function, and within that function I am going to use the variable name. That is, what is the variable name here? That is website. And the output I am going to get it, that is xyz.com, because whatever is written in that double quotes, right, it should be printed as a message in this. And like you have taken the variable, you are going to use with the print, then within the print function whatever you want to write, you may write directly also enclosing in the double quotes, or with the help of variable, if you are going to use it, just write the variable name, right? So it's about Like this, how you can write the variable name. Now changing the value of variable, it is not like it is fixed, like website is equal to xyz.com, and I'm going to print that variable, it is going to print xyz.com. Whereas if I want to change the value of that variable, I may change it number of times. It is not like it is fixed. It is not fixed. If once you have written some value, you can override this the other value by again defining the variable, like website is equal to abc.com, and then you are printing the variable, that is website, that will be abc.com, output will be coming. So you have changed the value. First you have assigned the value, that is xyz.com, and again in the second statement you are going to change the value, that is abc.com. Let's talk about some numbers also. We are just talking about string or characters in this. Let's talk about some numbers also. Assigning different values to different variables. Now how to assign different values to different variables? Let's see. A, that means ABC is equal to 5, right? Now in this you are printing the value of A, B and C. So it is basically going to print whatever you have given in the print function. Right. So you have written in the print function, that is print A. Then later on you are going to print the value of B. So this is how it is going to print it. So it is, make sure you are writing the values. You are printing the values while printing the values on the statement using print statement. So print is a function in which you are going to write the variable name. Right. And it could be anything. A variable can hold any type of data. We are not restricted towards strings or numbers or floating point numbers. We can have any type of data, right? Let us talk about some constants also, because these are also some important part of Python only. We have talked about what, that are variables and identifiers. Now let us move to constant. A constant is again a type of variable only, right? But whose value cannot be changed. You cannot change the value, right? In variable you can change the value, like you have seen in the previous slide. First you have given the variable name as xyz, then again you have given the name as abc.com. Whereas when we have constant, it is a type of variable. You are assigning the value to the variable, but you cannot change it. The values are fixed because it is a constant. It is helpful to think of constant as containers that hold information which cannot be changed later. So it is holding the value. It is, you are defining, you are assigning the value to a variable, but that value cannot be changed later on. Right? Now how to assign a constant, how to assign a value to a constant, how constants are declared, let us see this thing. In Python, constants are usually declared and assigned on a module. Here the module means a new file containing variables, functions, any other type of data, identifiers also, which is imported to the main file. Inside the module, constants are written in all capital letters and underscore separating the words. So you may say, when you are defining the constant, you may take the where constant as capital letters, right? So suppose I am taking the variable name, that is name, right? And they all are written in capital letters. So they may be stored as what? Constant. So let us see the details of how to define, what are the rules of defining the variables and constants. The first rule that I told you, create a name that makes sense. It should have meaningful name. You should not define some irrelevant names. Like suppose I am going to add two numbers and I am going to define A and B. What is this A and what is this B? Give some relevant number name. That is number 1. Give some, assign some value, then again take number 2 and assign some value. So rather than taking a meaningless names, it should be, keep in mind while defining the variables or constants, to make to give a name, to declare a variable with some relevant names, right? That makes some sense basically. Use camel case notation to declare a variable. It starts with lowercase letter. For example, my name. So my is in, it basically have a lowercase characters and it should have a capital case character. So these are not mandatory rules, but you may use it for your purpose. Like in future, if you are going to refer these files, so it is very much beneficial for defining the variables, right? Use capital letters where possible to declare a constant. So it is not mandatory. You may use a const keyword also, but to differentiate between constant and variable, you can use the constant with the capital letters only. Never use symbols, special symbols especially. You can use underscore. Underscore is allowed and it is, the compiler is not going to give you any error. But never use special symbols like exclamation, at the rate, hash symbol, dollar symbol, percentage symbol, ampersand, or any other symbol. They all are basically special symbols and they are not allowed, right? Let's move to the next rule. Constant and variable name should have combination of letters in lowercase or uppercase or digits or underscore. I told you number of times. While defining an identifier, you may take lowercase or uppercase characters. It may include digits also and it may include underscore. But you cannot start a variable name with a underscore symbol, right? It is mandatory, or you can start with the underscore, but you cannot start with a digit. Sorry, you cannot start with a digit or a number, right? You can start with any lowercase character or in any uppercase character, but if you follow some rules in future, like if you are going to, like I have made one program and after 2 years I am going to access that program, how I am going to understand if I am giving a variable name as irrelevant variable name? I myself get confused. What does this A? What is this B? What is this X? What is this Y? So always keep in mind while using, while defining the keywords, while using the keywords, while defining the identifiers, while defining the constants, you are going to give some relevant names, right? Thank you. Let us move a quick recap of this. The first is we have done with keywords. These are the number of keywords. There are 33 keywords in Python, and these keywords we cannot change these keywords. We cannot use these keywords as a variable name, right? Second thing, we have understood about identifiers. Identifiers could be a variable, identifier could be a function, identifier could be a class, identifier could be a module. But while defining these identifier, there are some rules for defining this. You cannot define these identifiers with irrelevant names. And there are, because the Python is case sensitive, the lowercase a and the uppercase a, they both are treated as different variables, different identifiers. They both are not same. They both are different identifiers. So it is very much important, like both are looking, manpower and manpower are looking same, but they both have the different memory locations. Like in this XY, one manpower is holding the 42 value and it is stored in somewhere in the memory, in one shoebox I would say. Another shoebox that is holding the again manpower, but in lowercase and holding some value that is 42. So both are treated as two different identifiers. They both are not same, right? Next thing we have understood, next thing we have talked about variables. Variables are the names that are given to the location in memory and that is holding some value, that is used to store some values. Then we can take it as a constants. Constants are the values. They are a type of variables. Yes, in fact, you cannot say like variables and constants are same. No, variables are the values, are the names that are given to the memory location to store the data, right? Then we have discussed about some how to define the variables and how to assign the values to the variable with the regard that what is the type of data. No, the basically it can be used for holding any type of data. It could be a string, it could be a number, it could be a floating point number, it could be a digits only, right? You may have any type of data in this while defining, while basically a variable is holding. It doesn't matter, it is regardless of this, like your a variable holds only string type of data. Yeah, if we are talking about a variable is holding number or type of, yeah, integer type of data. No, a variable is a container. It is a type of container which holds any type of data, right? The last topic which we have covered is constants. Constants are again a type of variables whose value cannot be changed. Whereas when we have defined the variables, I have shown you in the second example, in the second task, we have changed the value of the variable. First we have given, first we have assigned the value to the variable, that is website xyz.com. Again in the next statement, second statement, we have changed the value website is equal to abc.com. So if it is the constant, we cannot change the value because constants holds the value which cannot be changed later. So these are the differences between a variables and a constant. And make sure while defining, like if you have defined the variable, it can hold uppercase and lowercase characters, right? Whereas when we have constants, it is, make sure you are defining the constant with capital letters. Why? Because you can easily understood, like it is understood from the other words, like these values are holding some constant values. You cannot change these values in the later program. Like if you want to change the value of a variable, you can change it, but if you want to change the variable of a constant, you cannot change it. They are fixed values. So whenever you are defining the variables, you define the variables statement by statement, you can change it, you may change it, right, the value of the variables. But in case of constant, you cannot change the values of the constant, right? In the later coming lectures, we will be talking about the different operators, the different arithmetic operations, the different looping concepts, the different types of loops, the different types of like how to have decision making statements, what is print command, what is input command, how to take the input from the user. We will be studying on these topics in the later classes, in the later sessions. And how to install Python. The first thing is, everybody is using keywords, everybody knows keywords, what are constant, how to install Python. So I will be giving one session on how to download the Python on different operating systems. It may be on Windows, it may be on Mac, it may be on iOS. You may install it, you may download it using python.org or Anaconda prompt. You may directly move to the Google and type download Anaconda prompt, right? So in the later chapters, I would be telling you how to install Python and how to define, like what are variables, how to define these variables, how to use these variables in our program, right? And how to define like these statements. We will be compiling all the statements, all these examples in the later chapter, like in the coming sessions, like how to write a single variable and how to compile that particular program. Before that, we need to install the Python. We will be installing the Python and then we will be running the codes. We will be writing the program and running the codes. So I hope all of you have understood the concept of keyword, variables, identifiers, constants. Thank you.